All right, today we're going to dig into the stories we get told about major sex abuse scandals. We're using a really sharp analysis from Lawson Akije that forces us to ask some pretty uncomfortable questions about hypocrisy, power, and who we all choose to blame.
I mean, what a way to start, right? The author just kicks things off with this brilliant line. It's witty, for sure, but it's also deadly serious. It really sets the stage for an analysis that shows how these absolutely horrific stories cross borders, from Britain to the US, with some disturbingly similar patterns hiding just beneath the surface.
So let's start in Britain. The author argues that if you really want to understand the hypocrisy at play, you first have to see how the complex, gut-wrenching horror of child abuse scandals there got boiled down into this dangerously simple and prejudiced story.
What the source lays out is that certain media outlets and political groups took these sprawling, tragic events and basically turned them into a children's coloring book. You know? They created a really easy-to-digest story, a simple equation of blame that was super easy to get outraged about. And this was the formula they landed on. The narrative that got pushed, as Akube lays it out, was simple. The bad men were Muslim and Pakistani. And the victims? They were white and vulnerable. It's a story that very neatly assigns all the blame to one specific group.
But that simple story leaves out what the author calls the boring truths. You know, things like structural failure, institutional neglect, police just not caring. These are messy, complicated problems, and they're way harder to solve than just pointing a finger.
And that's really the crucial point the author makes here. It's just easier. It's so much easier to blame an entire faith or a nationality than it is to actually confront the deep systemic rot inside our own institutions. It lets the systems themselves get completely off the hook.
Okay, so now let's see what happens when we hop across the Atlantic. The author uses the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga as this perfect counterpoint, a way to test the very same logic that was so enthusiastically applied back in Britain. Just look at this list. The ingredients are chillingly familiar, aren't they? You've got young, vulnerable victims, powerful abusers, years and years of silence, and institutions that just conveniently looked the other way. The fundamental structure of the crime, as the author points out, is identical.
But this is where the story completely fractures. The profile of the perpetrators in the Epstein case is the polar opposite of the one that was pushed in Britain. Here, the offenders were white, wealthy, and just impeccably connected. Christian by background, as the author notes, Zionist by politics. And suddenly, that moral megaphone that was so loud before, it seems to have developed a fault. So you have these two totally different profiles for two crimes that are structurally almost the same. And this is where the author confronts us with the central question of his entire analysis. He uses it to expose what he sees as just a staggering hypocrisy.
And there it is. The author asks, okay, if we're gonna be consistent here, shouldn't we apply the same broad brush logic? Should the headlines be warning us about hedge fund managers? It's a deliberately provocative question, and it's designed to make us stop and really examine the standards we're applying.
Now, of course, your immediate reaction is that calling it that would be absurd, and the author agrees. But his point is that it is also technically accurate if, and this is a big if you use the exact same lazy, prejudiced logic that was used in the other cases. And this just brilliantly shows how the logic itself is the problem. It's flawed and it's rooted in prejudice, not in fact.
So, if it isn't about skin tone or religion or nationality, then what is the real common denominator here? What connects these cases across continents and cultures? Well, the author's synthesis is that it all comes down to one single corrosive element: power.
This right here is the core thesis. Read it again. Crime does not have a passport, a religion, or a skin tone. It's the simple, boring truth that just gets lost in all the noise and the outrage. The identity of the criminal is actually a distraction from the mechanism of the crime.
And we're not talking about power in some abstract way here. No, this is the very practical, very real ability to silence victims, to intimidate entire institutions into submission, to buy the best legal defense money can get you, and of course to secure those suspiciously lenient plea deals that leave everyone just shaking their heads.
This just illustrates it perfectly. It's two sides of the exact same tarnished coin. In Britain, girls were ignored because they were poor and inconvenient to the system.
In America, they were ignored because their abuser was rich and useful to the powerful. The accents are different, sure, but the disgrace is exactly the same.
So what Akibe is arguing is that all the public fights about race and religion, they actually serve a purpose. They're a wedge issue. They keep all of us angry and arguing sideways, with each other, instead of looking up at the powerful people and the broken systems that allow these horrors to happen in the first place.
And this brings us to the author's final takeaway. And look, it's not a simple one, and it's not designed to make you feel good. He calls it the unfashionable lesson, because it's a truth that's really hard to swallow, and even harder to tweet.
And here it is, the ultimate conclusion. Abuse isn't actually about the identity of the abuser. It's about the perceived value of the victim. The second a society or an institution decides that one group of victims matters less than one group of offenders, well, that's when the door to abuse is just thrown wide open.
The author leaves us with this final, really poignant question. This complex, uncomfortable truth about our societal values, it just doesn't make for a catchy slogan. And that's the challenge, isn't it? How do we have this crucial conversation in a world that so often prefers the simple, angry answer? Definitely a question worth thinking about.